What's up? Faizan here from Research Beast. On this channel, I share different tips and tricks for researchers, different motivational talks, and I also talk to experts about the research methods or anything related to research. So if you're interested in content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. So, what does it mean to be a productive researcher? These days, we are all overwhelmed with a lot of work that we are doing, and then amidst all of this, it becomes very important to keep track of our research, whatever we are doing in terms of research. Now, very interestingly, recently there was a research published in the Nature, which said that there are many researchers were having problems with efficiency of their research work or productivity of their research work. There was a research done by Stem Cell Technologies, and they report that 82% of scientists feel overwhelmed at work. Now, very interestingly, when we come to look at the research that is published in Nature, it gives us a lot of insights into what we researchers face day to day in terms of research productivity. In their research, they say that around 35% of the respondents report that they work on average 50 or more than 50 hours a week, which is a lot if you think about it. In fact, more than this, around 38% of the readers work more than 60 hours a week, which is like really a lot considering that normal work week is around 40 hours. And then if we look at what do people work on all this time, during all this time. So if you look at this infographic right here, you can see that around 28% of the respondents reported that they work on 5 or more than 5 projects at a given time. At this particular moment when I'm talking here, I have 13 research papers that are in the pipeline, and these are papers that are either under review or either under revision or stuff like this. These are not including all the papers that I'm working on currently, which are work in progress. So this just gives you a glimpse of what we researchers go through day to day in our research. But this is not all, because we also do have to teach, and we also have to do surveys and all that stuff. And many of us do have families, so there's a lot of stuff that comes from the family. So what I'll do is today in this video, I'll give you 9 tips on how you can become an efficient researcher. So these are just 9 habits. Remember that these are the things that you can develop over time in order to become good at what you do. And then in the later part of the video, I'll have Dr. Nisreen Ameen from Royal Holloway University in London, who will talk to us about how does she manage her work-life balance, how does she become a productive researcher, because she's one of the best researchers that I've seen in my network. So really productive. So we'll talk to Dr. Nisreen Ameen, and the video is coming up next. So when we talk about how to become an efficient researcher, this develops over time. So it's not like when somebody gets into a PhD, they can all of a sudden start doing all these things and they'll be very productive and efficient. These things take time. These are more like habits that you can develop. Number one, I would say, is start early. Now, many people who know me, they know that I normally keep the things towards the end because I can work well under pressure. So I normally create an artificial pressure by just bringing it closer to the deadline. However, learning from many mistakes, I would suggest to start early, plan as well as you can, but start early. Time goes very fast and we have a lot of things to do. Sometimes people lose track of things that they have to do. So the earlier you start, the better it is. And then obviously we can come across some unforeseen circumstances that we do not know about. So if you start early, you have a cushion period. If anything goes wrong, you can obviously work it out. Tip number 2 is to plan ahead. And one of the best things you can do is to maintain a to-do list. I do that for quite some time now, and it really helps. So if you have, and you can do it either physically, you can have a notebook or a diary or a to-do list, You can do it virtually on your phone, or one note or anything, any of those type of programs. You can use virtual programs, and but the whole idea is to keep track of what you are doing and planning for it. So that would be tip number 2. Tip number 3 is, um, when it comes to to-do list, obviously you put things on the list. Now the thing is, which of those things you should do. Now, when you're starting your day early in the morning, I think one of the things that work for me is to um, take on the task that I really don't want to do, because in the morning people are normally fresh. So if you are working on something complicated or boring, or you don't really want to work on it, if you get it done in the morning when you're very fresh, it makes it easier for you to go through the rest of the day. That would be tip number 3. Start with the things that you don't want to do, or start with the things that are really tiresome or boring or stuff like that. So that would be something that helps a lot. I mean, it helps me a lot, so I suppose that is going to help everybody a lot. Tip number 4 is to finish what you have already started. So many of us, and I know many of my friends, especially who are very enthusiastic about research, what they do is they start a lot of things, and every time they are inspired with some new ideas, they keep starting new stuff. I do the same. However, again, learning from mistakes, I think that it's very important to finish what we have started. So unless, let's say, many people can multitask, but there's a limit to everything. So let's say if you feel that you can work on 3 to 4 things at a time, do not take the next item on your to-do list, or do not take anything else unless you finish the things that you're working on right now. So make sure that finish the things that you have already started before getting the new things. Tip number 5 is to set goals. Obviously, sometimes we want to do things like, let's say, if you want to say that I want to finish my research paper in 3 months, this becomes difficult because 3 months is a long time. So, what I would say is to create smaller goals and to reward yourself. And one thing that many of us who study in business management is called SMART goals. And SMART is an abbreviation which starts with specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. So make sure that the goals that you set aside for yourself, or the goals that you set for yourself, those are specific, those are measurable, those are attainable, those are realistic, and those are time sensitive. So instead of saying that I'm going to finish a research paper in 3 months, you can simply say that I want to finish the introduction of my research paper within this week. A week is much more countable compared to 3 months. So tip number 6 would be to prioritize things. So once you set your goals, make sure that the goals that the things that take more priority goes first compared to the things that are less important. Now you can obviously do it in 2 ways. One is do the things that are more important, or where more people depend on the things, do them first, or the things that are easier to finish. So because the things that are easier to finish, you can finish more of them, which is ultimately going to motivate you to finish the other things. So prioritize the things, that is very important. So tip number 7 is to find yourself an accountability partner. What it means is to talk to your colleagues, or maybe your friend or somebody who's working with you, to keep checking on you. And we do it. I mean, my mentor, Dr. Jehan Chobanoglu, I work closely with him, and we do keep check on each other. So if you're working on something together, we constantly buzz each other, set up times, and obviously we are human beings, so it's not necessary for you to finish everything that you set up. So sometimes it's a good idea to have an accountability partner who can check on you and make sure that you are on track. So that is another tip that has worked for me over the years, and I think it can work for a lot of you out there. So, and also, once you have somebody you're working with and you set up a time, it's not a good idea to let them down. So normally it's something which is an intrinsic thing, and it makes people go ahead and finish their work. Tip number 8 is to create as less distractions as possible. The biggest distraction that many people have is their smartphone. So whenever people are set to work, constantly there are notifications on the smartphone, and it keeps distracting people. So the less the distractions you have on around your study area or research area, the more productive you can be. And there are many apps that can help you achieve that. You can obviously close the notifications. You can keep away your phone for a couple of hours. Believe me, one of the productive days recently that I had was I went to office space to work, and my phone was out of charge. So I put my phone on charge, I started working. And after 3 or 4 hours, I realized that my phone is not with me, and I got a lot of stuff done because there was less distraction from the phone. So make sure that your phone is out of sight. Keep it in a drawer, keep it in a bag for a couple of hours. You can also use headphones. Noise cancelling headphones are better. It's less distraction from outside. So use that. And then, you can also open the emails in a browser so that you do not get dings and tings from your phone, so that pushes you to go and check your phone, and then you know how it works. It's a flow state. People keep checking other things on their phone. So that's that. The last tip that I have for you is to obviously take care of yourself. This is very important. Many young researchers work long hours on weekends. I do the same. I mean, I don't remember any weekend where I've not worked. So make sure that you take care of yourself. Long hours, working hard is a good thing, but not on expense of your health. So eating, exercising, sleeping well, these are things that are going to help you focus better on your research. So make sure that you take care of yourself well before working really, really hard. Again, coming back to what I started this discussion with, these are all habits, and habits develop over time. So the more you practice these habits, the better you can become at them. Now that we are done with these tips, I'm going to talk to Dr. Nisreen Ameen. Like I said, Dr. Nisreen is right now a lecturer in marketing at Royal Holloway, University of London. And before this, she was working at Queen Mary, University of London, Birkbeck, University of London, and Anglia Ruskin University. She is also senior editor for Information Technology and People, and associate editor for International Journal of Consumer Studies, an editorial member of Journal of Business Research in the Consumer Behavior section. Her research areas include digital marketing, human-computer interaction, consumer behavior, artificial intelligence, and consumer sciences, and stuff like that. I am so proud of her for being an amazing researcher, but most of all, an amazing human being. And she is just so amazing in terms of research productivity. So I just thought it's a good idea to talk to her, because not only she is an amazing researcher, but also a single mom of two teenagers, and just unbelievable to see what she's doing. So I'll be talking to her about how she keeps that research productivity, and some ideas and tips and tricks for PhD students or young researchers. So stay tuned. The video is coming up next. Thank you.
Hey guys, if you think you are getting some value out of this video, please do not forget to hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel. I would also appreciate if you can share this video within your social networks or within your networks of people that may need this video. All right. Thank you very much, Nisreen, for joining and agreeing to do this short interview. I have quite a lot of academics on my social media networks, right? So I know quite a lot of people. And I must say that you are one of those very few people that I admire for being very productive. So I see your progress and what you are doing. And I really admire your productivity. Not only me, but some other people that I know also say very positive stuff about you. So I think you are the right person to ask some questions about productivity or how to be a productive researcher. So let me start with this, Nisreen. Um, um, Before I ask you a question, would you mind telling me a little bit about the stuff that you're doing right now? Like generally, what are some of the projects you're working on currently?
Thanks, Faizan. And likewise, it's the same for me. I think you are also one of the most productive people I've seen in academia. So thanks for the invitation. What I'm working on at the moment is, I think what every academic is working on really. So is to do with teaching undergraduates and postgraduates. Currently supervising a number of PhD students as well. I have my own research projects currently. Some of them are ongoing, some of them are at the very beginning, some of them are due to be hopefully accepted soon. In addition to that, I also work with different journals. So I make sure that I review just about, I would say, 7 to 8 papers every week for different journals. I recently got into being part of editorial boards for different journals as well in my research area. So in general, this is what I focus on as part of the job.
Thank you, Nisreen, and congratulations on being included on Journal of Business Research, which I saw yesterday, I guess, right? And then also on International Journal of Consumer Studies or Sciences. So congratulations for all those appointments.
Thank
and
you.
I guess it's a big gain for the journal. Okay, so now that we know that you're working on these things at this moment, and like I said, you are quite a productive researcher, in my opinion. How do you think a person can be a productive researcher? So if, let's say, somebody who is watching this video, they want to be a productive researcher, how can one be a productive researcher?
I think the first thing to do really is to set long-term goals. So the first question we need to ask ourselves is, where do we really want to be in 10 years' time? What's the end goal? Once we have this set and we know what the end goal is, at least, even if it's not for the next 10 years, even if it's for the next 5 years, that should also be fine. But knowing what, or having a long-term goal or objective is really, really helpful, because it sort of helps you to plan sort of backwards. What do I need to do by the end of 2020? For example, to reach my goal in 2025. So that's one of the first things that I started doing, and that was even before graduating and completing my PhD. The other part of it as well is, how do we make sure that these long-term objectives are sort of put into short-term goals that we can finish maybe in 6 months or 1 year or 2 years, and then going back to the daily activities. So making sure that there is some sort of productivity on daily basis, making sure that we don't leave it for a while and then go back to it. And I always tell my colleagues and friends, research is not something that we leave and then we go back to after a while. You've got to be part of this academic community constantly to be updated with what's going on, to learn from it as well as contributing to it. So I think these are sort of the major, I would say, points that I've been keeping in my mind for the past few years.
Thank you, Nisreen. You bring some very good 2 points, right? So one is long-term plan, which is a good thing. So you have something in your sight, like where do you want to be in 5 years? But then you bring another very interesting point, that to have some sort of a daily progress. So not only you make a plan for long-term, but you want to achieve it day by day, little by little, right? And I've seen many people who struggle, like, okay, I don't have a motivation, I cannot work. As far as there's a little bit push towards your main goal, like 2025, you're fine. And yes, some days are more productive, some days are less productive, but as far as you are trying to make some progress, you should be fine. So very good 2 points. Thank you, Nisreen, for that. Now, I understand. So you have a plan for, let's say, 5 years down the road, where do you see yourself? And then every day you are trying to create some progress. But then we are human beings. We are not robots. We are not programmed to do a certain thing every day, right? So what are some of your personal strategies that you want to keep up? So let's say last year, if you had a plan, there was no COVID-19, and now suddenly there's COVID-19. So things have changed. So what do you do in order to keep up with that goal while things are changing around you?
I think generally, even before COVID-19, being in academia is not an easy part of our lives. And there is no one way to actually say, well, this is my plan. So for example, we can get a paper rejected easily, despite that we worked on it for a year or so. We have to have a plan B for each paper. So for example, for each paper I work on, I usually have 3 journals, plan A, B, and C. So if it doesn't work with one, I don't get emotionally distracted. I just start immediately planning for the next one. I think the strategy also changes over the years because we change. The more we are part of the academic community, the more we are engaged with research, the stronger our skills become. So, for example, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I noticed that I wasn't that good in multitasking. I wasn't able to handle many papers or many tasks to do with research or even teaching on the same day. But the more skills and experience you gain throughout the years, you're able to multitask during the day and work on more than one thing. Sometimes we do get tired. We are human beings at the end of the day, and sometimes things happen, just like what you rightfully suggested, of course, regarding COVID-19. I think the idea is if we are so, if I'm going to speak about this personally, if I'm so tired, and it does happen sometimes during a certain day, I would go back and do the easier tasks, but just making sure that there is at least one thing done, even if it's just, sometimes I don't have to write anything. I can just read some articles related to a certain paper that I'm working on. What COVID-19 maybe has changed, and I can speak from experience as a mother and a researcher at the same time. Of course, yes, we are facing a very different type of situation that we haven't been through before. But I think, again, going back to where do we want to be in the next 5 to 10 years, being motivated by the end goal is really what takes us forward. And that's what I always even tell my students from the moment I do the interview with my PhD students, the potential ones. I always ask this question, think, where do you want to be in the next 5 years? And do all the work based on that. And that's, I think, in my case at least, that's what motivated me. And I think it will keep on motivating me. Without the long-term planning and being able to put this into daily routines, I mean, sometimes we do stop, of course, sometimes we're tired, so we just need to take a break. But just making sure that at least one thing, even if it's a small part, that can be achieved every day, that in itself does wonders. I hope that answers your questions.
Oh, of course it does, Nisreen. Thank you. So again, to summarize, then I picked up some interesting things that you talk about, and one of them is to provide yourself with multiple opportunities so that instead of really having an emotional breakdown if you get rejected or something with your paper, you should already know what are your different options or whatever. And I really like it because, you know what, I mean, when I talk to many students of mine, I see that we normally are management students, right? So we normally do management, whether it's hospitality management or information management or whatever. So I tell my students, like, you need to apply the theories in your own personal life as well, whatever we study, right? So let's say we all talk about SWOT analysis, but why do we limit SWOT analysis to only companies? Like, apply it to yourself, see what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. And I think one very important strategy that many companies do is scenarios. Create those scenarios for yourself, which you rightfully said, like, okay, if I'm writing a paper, instead of only focusing on one journal, let's have 2 or 3 options. So if something has to happen with one, move to another one. And maybe you don't even need to wait for 3 months to get rejected. Sometimes the journals are automatically sending you an email saying it's not exactly the right fit, or maybe you would be better into this journal or that journal. So multiple opportunities is a good example. Good point. The other one was that I really like was to love yourself before achieving something. And you didn't say it exactly that way, but I really think that we as researchers should really be mindful of our own well-being before doing other things. So I would say that that's a good point, to give yourself a room. Yeah, maybe you do not achieve things that you wanted to achieve for that day, but that's okay, at least as far as you're doing something. but the most important thing is to keep that final thing in your sight. Like, that's my final ultimate goal. So good points again, Nisreen. Thank you very much for that. Now, you did mention multitasking in your talk, in your answers for the previous two questions. Let me ask you this. How do you multitask? Like, do you think anybody can multitask, or do you think it depends on your personality? Or should people try? Should people avoid? What do you think?
I think in most cases, really, for an academic, multitasking at some point at least will not even be optional anymore. You know, when you run programs, when you manage programs, when you teach students, when you have deadlines for papers to be submitted, for example, or run a special issue, or review a paper, all of these are deadlines that we need to meet, and in many cases they are overlapping. And of course, the more experience we get and the more responsibilities we have, the more they're going to overlap. So as I said before, for example, every week I've got to review 7 to 8 papers. So that, of course, is going to overlap with some of the research I'm working on, with some of the teaching I do on the side, or the teaching preparation for the next academic year. So at the end of the day, yes, it will happen. I think it's not something that we can choose. And I was telling you earlier, maybe even before the interview now, I think maybe as a female, I feel like I'm lucky because females are really good in multitasking. Males are really good in multitasking as well, but maybe it's part of our nature, so it becomes sort of easier. And it depends, to me, when I multitask, it depends on the level of importance and the urgency. So sometimes, for example, I think one part that we also spend a lot of time on is responding to emails during the day. And I meet many academics that keep on telling me, well, emails take a lot of our time, and that's absolutely fine. Now, when do we respond to emails? Do we really have to respond during the daytime, for example, or during the nighttime, during the evening? It just depends, and every institution has its own way and system, of course, in terms of responding to emails. So these are just some very simple examples in terms of managing time and multitasking. As I said before, in many cases, it's not even optional. Like, if I just give you an example of what I've done today, I had to submit a paper, review a paper, manage some of the submitted papers to a special issue I'm working on. It just happens that, you know, we don't have that sort of freedom in terms of picking a certain task and working on it in a certain day. In terms of how to manage it all, as I said before, I think understanding the importance and urgency of the task. So if the deadline, for example, is a must for the next 2 days, and I know that it will take a lot of time, then I'll make it a priority on my schedule. And also, it's important to give yourself some time as well to just make sure that in case of something doesn't end by the deadline, there is also some flexibility. I think that's really important. Something that I've always been keen on doing as well is not to keep things to the very last minute, because that adds more stress. The earlier we do it, the better it is. And that goes for research papers, marking, you know, working on whatever that I need to work on. It's really important to just not leave it to the very last minute. I'd rather just do it early and then go back and revise and refine and all that. So these are some very, you know, small tips, I would say, of what I usually do. I'm sure you'll have more tips maybe in this area.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, again, it really depends on the type of people, right? Your personality is what you are comfortable with. And I think all the tips are pretty good. I think I like that as an academic, you normally don't even have an option of whether you want to multitask or whether you're not, because well, if you think about when you are hired and you are given your contract, if it's a tenure and promotion sort of thing, you are supposed to be assessed on 3 areas: teaching, research, service, right? Which in itself is 3 different distinct areas. And then the research goes into papers and conferences and grants, and then, I mean, service goes to your department and university and the society and all this, right? So obviously it's a lot of multitasking. Now, importance and urgency, I do the same thing. Like you, whatever you have, think about it, whether you want to do it in terms of importance, which one is more important, or which one is urgent, right? So again, similar. The only difference, and again, that's a personality thing. I tend to do things towards the last minute, and the reason for that is because I produce much better results under pressure. So when I'm under pressure, I can produce much better work. And one way of putting myself under pressure, and that's an artificial way of doing it, is to wait till the last minute, because then you have the time pressure, right? And then, so again, either way, it's as far as you are getting your things done in the right quality, right? Quality is important. So that's completely fine. Thank you for those tips, Nisreen. Two very quick questions, okay? So now I know you. I know you are a mom. You have kids, and then you obviously are living in another country, which is not the country of your birth. So there's social ties and all these different things. And then you're an academic, a very good one, very productive one. How do you manage your work-life balance? And the reason why I'm asking this is because I feel that we as an academics do not have the liberty of work-life balance like other people. So we don't have a 9 to 5 job. We don't know, like, you have to go at 8 o'clock, come back at 5, and then the rest of the time you can watch Netflix or eat ice cream or do this or that. I mean, like you just said, right? You have deadlines, you have different type of things, and emails. Anytime emails can come up. Plus, we have collaboration. So if let's say I'm collaborating with you, we have a 5 hours difference. So you need to, like, sometimes you have to meet at a weird time, 2 a.m. because somebody in China is 2 p.m., right? So I mean, you don't really have that type of luxury. So what do you do in order to keep that, so-called work-life balance?
I think personally, and this is just a personal experience, I didn't get into a full-time job until my youngest child was 12 years old. Before that, I kept it as part-time to make sure that I can manage work, and at the same time, I can manage looking after my family. At the moment, things are slightly easier in terms of managing home and work at the same time. I guess after a while, even your kids start to understand the type of job that you have and actually admire it. And they become your biggest motivators and the people that really encourage you to do even more. And in fact, sometimes we reached a point where they were talking about doing their own research. So for example, my daughter is only 16, and now she just started working on her own research paper. She wants to publish soon. So I guess after a while, at the beginning, it's definitely really, really difficult to manage work, and especially as an academic. And as you mentioned, the time difference, the commitment, and even before COVID-19, it was the traveling. But after a while, even your family starts to understand what it's like to work. And at the same time, I think maybe it's important to just keep some solid time, which is called family time. So there should be some time to, for example, watch a movie with the kids, to making sure also having daily conversations. Now, these conversations don't have to be strictly research or work or study related, even for them. It can just be on any matter really that would interest them. It just after a while you sort of get used to it, and you gain a better understanding of how to manage both. I think it's one of these areas that can't be generalized because it depends so much on the kind of parent you are, and also on the type of children that we have. So I don't think that my case is very much generalizable, like we can generalize it to other families. But that's the story. I mean, they've been with me since I was a PhD student, so they got a better or a good understanding of what it's like to be committed and responsible. And at the same time, they know that, I'm always there. While I also understand that our job requires a lot of commitment, I think we sort of we can also have the experience of working from home in a way, which is something that I know many academics did even after, even before COVID-19. So that's another thing that I would say maybe is a blessing for academics, because we don't have to be away from them 5 or 6 days a week. It can work sometimes to actually, take your work at home and still work on it and still be there with them. So these are my tips. I hope you find them helpful.
No, of course. I mean, like you rightfully said, I mean, it depends on the family. It depends on how much support do you have, because a lot of people who are living in joint families, and they have much more support from the grandparents and, uncles and aunties and a lot of other things. So, I mean, it really depends. And then if you are in your home country versus if you are in another country, and cultural and this and that's a lot of things, but good things. I mean, in my case, it's the same, because my kids do understand something, even though they are very small. But then what I do is whatever time I have with the kids, I want to make sure that it's very quality time. It's only for them, like no other distraction. So works for different families, but it's important to have that consideration that, don't put yourself into a situation where you completely ignore the other parts of your life. And going back to the same thing, to give yourself room to be mindful of your own well-being as well. So, Nisreen, one last question for you. You are supervising multiple students at this time, and you've been a PhD student by yourself as well. What is your one ultimate tip for PhD students in order to be productive? What do you think?
I think it again goes back to my earlier point, which is knowing what your ultimate goal is in, let's say, in 5 or 10 years' time. And I think the other thing that PhD students also need to maybe be mindful of is, what type of an academic do you want to be? Is it just about completing a PhD, which is not something impossible to be done? Or is it more also about being the type of academic that you would really want to be proud of, and you want to have a career in academia? And very often my PhD students think that the most difficult moment of their life is their viva, while I always assure them that it's actually not. It's what happens after the viva. So what kind of academic do you want to be after that? What kind of research do you want to do? What kind of quality or high quality research? Who do you want to be associated with in academia? There are also other parts of it, of course, that are happening now. So for example, for UK students, it's really difficult to sometimes get a job after they graduate. So by the second year, I always start advising them to maybe start and find a teaching job on the side. And at the same time, try to look into publications. So it will be really, really good if they think of what to publish out of their thesis by the maybe mid or end of the second year. The other advice I would also give is, your thesis is what defines you, and the beginning of the long journey of being an academic. So the topic of the thesis has to be something that you're really, really interested in to be able to survive for 3 years. I myself was supposed to finish my PhD in 6 years' time, but because I was so passionate about my research, and I also understood that the area of technology use or adoption, as we called it back then, is a very fast evolving area that would never stay the same for 6 years. So I had to work really hard on it, and because the topic was really interesting to me, I was able to finish in I think in total it was 3 years, including the viva time. So making sure that your topic is interesting to you before anyone else, and that it defines what will come up next, and also understanding that the viva is not the end of it. It's actually a new start for a whole journey that it might be a lifetime for some of us as well.
Yes, rightfully said. It's a career choice that many people make without that realization that you just pointed out, and that actually creates a lot of problems later, because it's that gap between what do you expect and what do you get out of it. So I think setting those expectations right is very important in the start, to know that, this is how this job looks like. But anyway, Nisreen, thank you so much for your valuable advice, and your answers were very spot on. I really enjoyed listening to you because a lot of that stuff resonates to me. I'm pretty sure it resonates to a lot of other academics as well, because it's pretty much the same for everybody for some of the stuff. Thank you once again for agreeing to be part of this interview. And thank you for answering all the questions so patiently. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Faizan, and thanks for the invitation.
Of course.
Thanks.